health, parenting, finance, travel, and home improvement. This is the Suburban Folk Podcast.
Hey guys, this is Greg with the Suburban Folk Podcast, telling you about our first episode of 2021. It's a product review as well as a preview. My guest is Drew Vernon. He is the marketing director for a toy company called Tonies. Tonies and the Tony Box is an audio speaker that allows children to use the Tonies to place them on top of the speaker box and hear songs or stories. And then I'll also tell you a little bit about the Creative Tony, where you can record your voice or sing songs, whatever you want it to be, and then place that Tony on top of the box and basically have it play whatever you want it to play for different applications, which if you take a listen to the episode, Drew will walk through a lot of the different uses that people have been able to use the product for. He was also nice enough to send me a Tony box and Tonies to try out. My kids are age 4 and 6, so right in that range for who would be using this particular toy. It happened to come on Christmas Eve, so it had some stiff competition in the form of my kids' other Christmas presents, but it really did exactly what I think the company is intending it to do, in that screen time is definitely a concern. It is for me and my kids, and I think it is for a lot of parents. So it takes them away from that, can be engaging, allows them to use their own creativity and autonomy to interact with a piece of technology that my kids found pretty easy to use. In fact, my son is right at that age where he's starting to become interested in video games. After about an hour of playing his new games through the Christmas season, this was something that he could go over to and listen and take a little bit of a break from that particular technology. So let's take a look at the product itself, and I'll tell you what I found to be really nice and easy to use with it. So this is the Tony box itself. It's padded all the way around, so you can see the speaker is right here in the front. But if it gets dropped, let's say if your kid has your cell phone, you're going to be really nervous about that screen breaking or something like that. You don't really have that issue with this because, again, it is really well padded. The plug is on the very bottom. There is a docking port, so it can just be sit right there so that it can charge. On the top here are the ears, I would call it, and that's where you can control the volume. Bigger ear for volume up, smaller ear for volume down. And then there is an indicator light that's blue, red, or green, depending on what's going on with the box itself, so you know where you're at. The packaging I don't have here, but pretty well packaged, easy to get the directions working, as most products nowadays seem to be. It has a QR code that'll take you right to the companion application that you can use to track the Tonies that you have, and also use that Creative Tony that I'll show you in just a second. So my box came with 5 different Tonies, and I'll show you a couple of those. Here is Pinocchio. I talk actually in the show about Disney. For those that have listened to the Suburban Folk Podcast, I pick on my wife quite a bit. She is a Disney fanatic, so we mentioned that quite a few times. So she was happy to see that ours came with The Little Mermaid, another one for Cars, and then the Little Fox. He does a lot of different music that you'd be very familiar with the age group that we're targeting here. And then this Creative Tony that I was talking about with the recording functionality. So the other ease of use that my kids absolutely were able to do, the bottom is magnetic. So once it's green, it's been set up, actually to set it up through your Wi-Fi so that it can connect, especially for the recording. It walks you right through it. You connect through, I believe it was Wi-Fi if I remember correctly, and then you get your phone to connect to your local Wi-Fi, that kind of thing. Again, it all walks right through it. It's blue at that point. Once it's green, you're connected, et cetera, et cetera. But this is magnetic, and you can just literally put it right on the top, and hopefully you can hear this.
Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi.
And then it will go through the story, and whatever content is already preloaded in these. And then as soon as you go to another one, like Little Mermaid, for example, it'll play right in. One feature that we're still getting used to between one and the other is that if I were to start, let's say, Pinocchio again,
Pinocchio.
He'll start to play, and if I take him off and put him back on, it'll go exactly from where you left off. However, if you put on a different Tony, then go back to another one, it starts over again at the beginning. That's one thing, as my kids were figuring out who was going to play with it, that they got a little bit frustrated with. But there is a fast forward function so that you can get back to where you need to be. And that's actually part of the technology that makes it easy for kids. If you actually tilt it left or right, that will fast forward by a certain amount of increments. I forget how many. But the other way to go from chapter to chapter is you actually just kind of tap it on the side and it'll go from chapter to chapter. So that's something to remember. You got to read through that, make sure you understand that part. But that's easy enough for kids to figure out rather than going through the screen and figuring out how to fast forward and so on. So that's one thing to remember if you have a kid that's not wanting to lose their place, if they're trying to share it like my kids were during the Christmas break, then be aware if you put another one on, it'll make the change. Then the Creative Tony maybe takes the most time to figure it out. Again, it's very easy with the app. Took me maybe 2-3 minutes to figure out how the recording functionality works and then uploading it to this Tony itself. And basically once you do that, once you sync it, it works just like everything else. So one of the recordings I have here is my daughter singing Let It Go very briefly. So I'll show you how that sounds.
I can't hold it back anymore. Let it go.
And of course, you can put whatever you want really in this part of the recording to record your phone. Again, when you bring the app up, then you can just sync it with whatever else you've put on there. And you just put that Creative Tony on just like you do those other preloaded content Tonys that are available. One other note, I didn't know in my package how many of the Tonys were going to come with this Tony box. Again, it was 5. I didn't select what those 5 were. So when you go to the website, you should have, I believe, some of those options of what comes in for your particular Tony. When you go to the site, you'll see there's a decent amount of content. And also, as Drew talks about in our episode, they are pretty brand new into the market. So the expectation is that the amount of content that they have available will continue to grow quite a bit. And of course, you can imagine these could become pretty collectible for your kids depending on what they happen to be in. So overall, it does what it's supposed to do as far as screen time is concerned. Again, that was probably my favorite part and will continue to be my favorite part, is it allows my kids an alternative technology that eliminates screens. Also on the technology front, if your kids are like mine, they want to interact with technology the same way the adults in their lives do. Of course, usually that's with a phone. But for example, I have podcasts on all the time where I'm not looking at the screen on my phone, but they can hear that happening. So this is a piece of technology that my kids can operate, and it's almost like their own personal podcast that they can use, which they think is kind of nice because they can act a little bit like the adults that they see in their lives. And then that last piece of the creativity, I think, is really, really important in any education topics that I've discussed with people on the show or otherwise. There's a continued emphasis on autonomy and problem solving and having things be what you want it to be rather than having to follow everything step by step. So as they're able to learn that, it'll be really, really big. One other preview to check out in the episode that Drew mentions is being able to interact with grandparents so they could have the app and record things on it, and you could upload that to the Creative Tony and have your kids communicate with your grandparents in that way, or vice versa. You could actually even get one for grandparents, and it's easy technology for them to use. Sometimes older folks have a hard time with different and new technology, so they would also be able to use the piece of equipment. But again, being able to have a creative outlet and learn something like that, I think, is also very, very important. So those are the big 3 things that are really stand out to me with the product. And great news for listeners of the podcast and viewers of the YouTube channel, we have 1 Tony box to give away. So if you like this review, you think it would be something that your kids would enjoy, if you send an email to greg@suburbanfolk.com, again, just check that out below me here, greg@suburbanfolk.com. Make sure you put in the subject line Tonies, Tonies, and you will be entered for a drawing to win your own free Tony box. We'll get your information and have that sent right out to you. Before we go, here is a clip from the show of Drew talking about the inspiration for Tonies and a little bit about his background.
Well, the impetus, it was created by a couple of dads over in Germany, and they were on the board of a preschool together and noticed that their children's teacher was still using CDs to play stories and songs. And they thought, gosh, CDs have been around forever. They're just as clunky as ever, and kids can't operate them without a parent or a teacher helping them out. So could we upgrade the technology and make it intuitive enough by design so that a child young as 3 could operate it in a screen-free way? So that's the generation story of Tonies. It was not even on the radar at the time. This was back in 2015, 2016. People weren't thinking so much about screens. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry recommends that you give your kids an hour of screen time a day on weekdays and up to 3 on weekends. Well, that's a pre-COVID world. The general measures, you let your kids look at screens for about an hour a day. And after that, you start to get the parental guilt. Well, I think COVID has kind of thrown parental guilt out the window because we're all just trying to get by. And I get it. I've got 3 kids, they've been on school, off school, hybrid learning, day off, it's so hard to manage. And to have something like the Tony Box, which is already this great tool for kids to use and operate on their own now in a COVID world where we are trying to give them another tool. We are trying to give them another activity that's not on a tablet, that's not on a smartphone or a TV. So I think it fits in great to the current situation in which we find ourselves.
To hear the rest of Drew and my conversation about Tonies and parenting and Tonies in the classroom for teachers, go to suburbanfolk.com or search Suburban Folk in any podcasting application. You can also check out tonies.com, that's Tonies.com, for more information on products as well as to make a purchase. Again, we have 1 free Tony to give away, so email me at greg@suburbanfolk.com for your chance to win that free Tony box. Also, check out suburbanfolk.com for many, many other conversations around parenting, health, finance, different things that us suburbanites have to deal with. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.